Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are both very excited to be talking to you about the 1985 Martin Scorsese film, After Hours.
Why don't you just go home?
I've been asking myself that one all night long.
So what happened? Why can't you?
I met this girl tonight, okay, in a coffee shop.
I feel like something incredible is really going to happen here.
So when I got home, I gave her a call. On the cab on the way down here, all my money flew out the window. I didn't really get along with her that well.
What's the matter?
I said, I want to see a plaster of Paris bagel and cream cheese paperweight. Now cough it up. So I left. Kiki! So I haven't got enough money to get home until I meet this bartender who wanted to lend me the money. That's all right, forget it. It's all right.
Poor boy.
So I go back to the girl's apartment, but her roommate's really pissed off at me for the way I treated her friend.
This the guy?
Hi.
So I marched right in there to apologize. Come on! But she'd already killed herself. I was too late.
Oh, wow.
Lighten up! What is this?
I'm in big trouble. Big trouble. Now this part, you're gonna say, oh, you're lying to me. Don't lie to me, but it's true. Mohawk this guy. I couldn't believe that.
It's him!
Tell him, it's not my fault. I didn't do it.
I gotta tell who you didn't do what.
Help! Call the police!
What's with you? Are you nuts or something?
Luckily, there was this girl who saw the whole thing.
You're dead, pal.
And what?
So now she's the one in the Mr. Softy ice cream truck who's trying to kill me. They're all trying to kill me. I just wanted to leave. You know, my apartment, maybe meet a nice girl. And now I've got to die for it, you know? What do you want from me? What have I done? I'm just a word processor, damn it.
Is that all there is?
After Hours, when anything can happen, and usually does.
Is that unbelievable or what?
Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr. Huddlestone?
I do. So this is from Rotten Tomatoes. In a Manhattan cafe, word processor Paul Hackett, Griffin Dunne, meets and talks literature with Marcy, Rosanna Arquette. Later that night, Paul takes a cab to Marcy's downtown apartment. His $20 bill flies out the window during the ride. Flying out the window during the ride portends the unexpected night he has. He cannot pay for the ride and finds himself in a series of awkward, surreal, and life-threatening situations with a colorful cast of characters. He spends the rest of the night trying to return uptown. And as you said, it's directed by Martin Scorsese, stars Griffin Dunne, Rosanna Arquette, Teri Garr, Verna Bloom, Cheech and Chong are in this, Linda Fiorentino. So neither of us had seen this before, and I think you said you had not heard of it even prior to this.
Never even heard of it.
What did you think?
It made an impression on me. He won Best Director at Cannes that year for this. Martin Scorsese did. It was nominated for the Palme d'Or. Didn't win it. 1985 in American cinema. So many of the movies that we've done on this podcast came out in 1985. Having lived in New York for 20 years, I get the kind of crazy night motif. You're out in the wee hours of the night in New York, and you meet crazy people, and crazy stuff happens. I think it's dated in really delightful ways, right? The rotary phones and just people's attitudes and what people are afraid of. There's burglars breaking into a place, and that's what people are afraid of in New York City. I think that the directing is he deserves the acclaim that he got for this. It's very well directed. And I don't know that I know enough about directing to talk about specific ways, but the feel of it, the pace of it, the tone of it is very consistent. Some of the shots are really, really gorgeous and interesting. there's a kind of a 1985 thing about it. He's this sort of not middle management, but he has this sort of office job. He's a word processor.
Oh, and let me say real quick, he's not even mentioned because he's only in it for a couple minutes. But him and Bronson Pinchot are the first people that you see in the movie. I thought that was. I'm sure that I don't know exactly when Perfect Strangers started, but it would have been right before he became a star.
Catherine O'Hara's in this. Like you'll recognize Cheech and Chong are in this. You'll recognize everybody.
It's a great cast.
You will recognize. You're like, oh, it's this guy. Oh, it's her. Yes, it's an unusual cast, but he meets an unusual cast of characters. His evening gets weirder and weirder, but there is this sort of yuppie. The guy can't catch a break. He's just a nice guy trying to, in every turn, he's being emasculated or confused or abused by some woman. And that all felt very 1985 to me, although I think now, it's not that this movie is about men's rights or anything like that, but it's very much from the perspective of like, look, I'm just a nice white guy trying to have a good time. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. And, everybody treats me like I'm the bad guy, which I thought was really interesting to watch in 2023. It's not that the lead doesn't do a good job, but I found him not particularly compelling as a lead. I didn't find myself... It's not... His acting wasn't a problem. I think his acting was good, but I didn't care about his feelings or what was happening to him, which is a major problem for me. He does do some messed up stuff. Like he meets this young woman played by Patricia Arquette, and she overdoses on pills. And I know this is supposed to be a black comedy, but he goes into her room and assumes she's asleep and is talking to her, and then he realizes that she's dead. And then he's like, oh, I left my keys at this other guy's place, and calls the police and gives them the address, and then leaves a note, says dead person. I mean, you don't leave a scene like that. That's just not human. I don't care where your keys are. Mm-hmm. People don't do that. So, I mean, I feel like in some ways calling this a dark comedy strains... I don't know. I don't know exactly where I'm going with that. Blah, blah. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting too. And, I've said on the show before that I'm not really into some of Martin Scorsese's most popular films because I've never just in general liked mob stuff. I like Taxi Driver a lot. I like Cape Fear. I liked Shutter Island until I didn't like the ending of Shutter Island, but overall it's a good movie. But I mean, I've always thought he was really interesting as just a figure in film, and I mean, I understand the importance of him, but a lot of his movies have never connected that much for me. But I thought with this, it was interesting that this is meant to be comedic, whereas I've known people before who thought like Goodfellas is funny, and I'm just like, is it supposed to be funny? I never really got, you know what I mean? It's just like, it never seemed funny to me, but anyway, so I think it's really interesting to see a director like this do what's meant to be more or less a straight up, it's supposed to be funny. And I think that's really interesting what you said, that he won the Palme d'Or and that because...
Well, he didn't win the Palme d'Or. This film was nominated. He won Best Director.
Okay, I see. But it's interesting that, this is a little too much to say because, this is on Amazon Prime and other streamers, but it's almost a lost movie because nobody ever, it's just like... He has so many other beloved films that nobody talks about this movie, you know.
Right.
And I guess people talk about this because I had seen it mentioned on Twitter a couple of times, and I thought, and I could remember seeing the cover of this as a kid, and you know the cover, the poster is a clock, and like he's on top of it. I think it's maybe like a woman's hand like pulling on his head or something, and it looks like a screwball comedy, which is not what this is. You know what I mean?
Right.
It looks like those. It would be like an 80s almost sex comedy or something like that, and that's not what this is at all. That lead,
Although
as you said, is Griffin.
It's sort of dressed up as it. I mean, the bits they do are sort of fit into that, but I didn't feel like the tone or you know, I just don't. I'm trying to think of a funny. Did Scorsese do other comedies?
He has. I've never seen The King of Comedy. I don't know if it's supposed to be funny or not.
Supposed to be.
Yeah,
it's not funny.
Okay.
I mean, it's a classic too. Robert De Niro is a comedian in it. It's really actually the fact that Robert De Niro is in Joker is
it's
a reference to
the same movie,
King of Comedy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me because I think Scorsese is one of the great American directors. But I don't think comedy's his thing.
No, and I mean, this is I guess it's interesting because this is, even though there's some dark things that happen in this is so much lighter than anytime I see a Scorsese movie, I'm just always waiting for the scene where somebody snaps and like beats somebody to death with a hammer or something, you know what I mean? And that's not really this kind of movie, you know?
No, but it has. I mean, there's streaks of that. People lose it and they snap, and you know, a woman overdoses, and the violence is in the people express violent urges towards one another. He goes to a nightclub where it's supposedly Mohawk night, and they kind of grab him, and they're gonna shave his head into a mohawk, and he's really distressed, and you think, ha ha ha, but it doesn't feel funny. The scene doesn't feel funny. He feels, perhaps disproportionately, but he feels like he's being attacked, you know, and it's shot like the violence feels real. The violence of them holding him down and going to shave his head very explicitly against his. I mean, they're being bullies to him. And that's how the scene is shot. It's not shot like a waka waka. Isn't this crazy, silly fun? It's a Scorsese movie. You know, it's very much a Scorsese movie. And
the funny thing about that, though, is
funny.
I think if you put this movie on, and without saying it was a Scorsese, if you put this on for somebody and just said, and like didn't let them see the credits and just said, okay, who do you think directed this? Like, how many people would guess it was Scorsese, you know?
I don't think I would have guessed that he would have been drawn to this material. But I wouldn't have said someone like Rob Reiner, right? I mean, there are comic directors that really have a sense of that more than have a sense. I mean, directors like Reiner, I think have sort of changed what the American idea of, in our lifetimes, have kind of, like Sondheim with the American musical, have affected what we think of as a comic film. So, I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I liked watching it. There was a lot I liked about it. Scorsese's one of those New York directors like Woody Allen that loves New York, and their films are sort of love letters to New York.
Yeah, that's
you
what I
couldn't
was
imagine
thinking,
this film.
Love letter is exactly the right
being
thing.
set in another city or having, you know, it's everything about it is about the New York experience. Just from the way that people are casually intimate and casually hostile and unfazed by anything, and he keeps looping back around, right? I mean, he runs into the same diner, and he runs into the same cab driver, and it's like the thing, especially by Act 3, the thing has just completely looped back around on itself when we see Paper Mache again, and the guys that rob at the place come and rob, and he's wrapped up in the paper mache, and then they, right? I mean, it just is this sort of, the clock is an interesting thing, because he's just trying to get home and get to bed. The clock in the poster makes it seem like 3 o'clock high or something, like there's this, if he doesn't get to work by 9, he's fired or something. There's no... Time doesn't play a particular role in this movie, except that it just gets later and later, and he gets more and more manic and frustrated and exhausted, and things get crazier and crazier. Yeah. Why the mob is convinced that he's the burglar, but I can't remember why the mob is convinced. That there's a couple of guys in an apartment that didn't recognize him. He's in there legitimately for reasons, but they didn't recognize him, and they're scared because there's a burglar running around. Then later, one of their apartments does get robbed, and they spot him in the building again, and they just assume that's the guy, he's the burglar. Mm-hmm. And it ends with a kind of a mob chasing him. They don't have pitchforks and torches, but they're like, you assume that if they catch him, they're going to beat him into the hospital. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, how did that happen? Right? Call the police. What
and
are
also, you? I thought was funny, they put up posters, and I wondered who and there's a drawing of him, of his face, and I thought, who made this drawing?
Well, Teri Garr did, right?
Oh, that's right.
He sits down and she starts sketching him. But
that's
why?
Right.
Why she decided, like, she's the one putting up these pictures of him. Why she decided he's the criminal, I missed.
I'm not 100% sure either.
Yeah. So things snowball, but maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention. Things snowball, but yeah, it's a really weird movie. It's certainly competently made. You know, we've watched some bad movies that are not competently made. And this was competently made. I think it tried to be a couple of different things. I think it tried to be a comedy. I think they decided they had to market it as a comedy. It's not really a drama.
No.
It's too absurd to be a drama. But it's filmed like a drama. And the comedy is so dark, it's almost sadistic. So I don't know what you would call this movie if you didn't call it a comedy. But I didn't find it funny. But it was really compelling. It was really interesting to watch.
It also it's a comedy and also falls into the, there's been a ton of movies made like this subgenre of a movie that takes place in one night.
Yeah.
The whole film is just the course of an entire night.
Yeah.
Which is I have always enjoyed that subgenre for whatever reason. I've always thought that's kind of a neat conceit in films.
You know what it made me think of was the LA one about the nuclear Miracle Mile. It made me think of Miracle Mile.
That's actually a good comparison. This isn't as dark as that.
No, it's not the apocalypse, but it is this kind of like frantic, ever increasing, absurdity of and people run into each other again, and that's an LA film. This is a New York film, but they could be sisters.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. You watch these on a double feature,
and it's hard to fit into. They're both hard to fit into a box.
Yeah, I wonder. While you're talking, I'm going to look at IMDb and see what IMDb categorizes it as. Because they will have, categories for it.
Something I was looking at about this characterized it as a cult film. I'm surprised I had never heard of it. The fact that it's Scorsese, the fact that he won Best Director at Cannes, the fact that it's a 1985 movie, I'm like, how have I never even heard of this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's definitely worth a watch. I mean, I'll jump right ahead to my recommendation. I think you should check it out. I mean, it's a weird date night movie. But, I mean, if you're both kind of into Scorsese, I think that'd do it. There's more entertaining comedies for sure.
The main keywords for IMDb are mistaken identity, black comedy, Soho, Manhattan, New York City, female nudity, and paranoia.
There's not a bunch of female nudity in it.
No.
A little bit.
Again, it's also this kind of, you have this, and I don't know, maybe my life has not been that interesting, but you also have this movie thing of where he just keeps meeting these attractive women, and he has,
and they're all interested in him for some reason. Like they're all interested in him. I'm like,
he's just
wow.
kind of this regular guy. You know.
There's nothing particularly exciting about.
I mean, maybe that's he's presenting a male fantasy or something, but everybody that he meets is also kind of crazy too, so. But you had brought up Griffin Dunne, and I don't know that other than American Werewolf in London, I don't know that I've ever seen him in anything. I mean, I know he's an actor that I'm aware of, but can you think of other Griffin Dunne movies that you've seen?
I cannot. Again, I don't. I mean, it's not that he's bad
really good
looking.
in American Werewolf in London.
It's not that he's not a good actor. There's something about him that didn't stick with me. I was like, meh. I don't care. It's like I'm having a really hard time, and I'm like, I don't care, bud. Good luck.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe Scorsese thought he was great, and Leo was too young to be cast in this, So, but it's also kind of this. They do this a lot in comedies. I always think of did you ever watch, when we were kids? Did you ever watch the show Newhart? Where Bob Newhart had the...
Yeah, I mean, not religiously.
And, he's like the straight man, and everybody else in that show is insane, basically. He's kind of the only normal person. And I kind of wondered if he was going for that a bit here, where it's just sort of, like you said, it's just like he's this regular guy, and he just encounters all these strange people, Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to hear somebody who has like deep lore on this movie, because it's such an odd duck. It's so competently made. Nothing in a Scorsese movie that I've seen feels arbitrary. Yeah. Doesn't feel like, and then we'll get from here to there and we'll figure out and we'll show some, some stock footage feeling stuff. Nope. Every shot he does feels very deliberate. And there's some shots in this that I feel... Right at the beginning, when we come in to meet Griffin Dunne's character, and he's sitting at his computer with the big clickety-clack beige keyboard and the little black screen with the green cursor on it. There's this sort of dolly shot that comes swooping in through the office, and it's such an exciting shot. Mm-hmm. Not that this is the first shot of its kind, but there's something about the pace of it and the way this thing comes swooping in that really sets a tempo, and it kind of comes in and swirls around and we find them. And there's so much personality in the camera that it kicks it off. It ends with that same shot where we find him and then it sort of backs out serpentine-like. Mm-hmm. And I thought that's so interesting, that shot. Like Scorsese has come up with camera work that, whether or not it achieves precisely what, it's hard for me to know if my experience of it is the experience that he wanted me as the audience to have or not. But what is undeniable is you're like, wow, that's original. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that particular shot.
Yeah. There's another shot where he's at a sink and he's splashing water on his face. And instead of having it, horizontal, he has the camera tilted like this, which I just thought that was, and it's just a 2 or 3 second shot, but I thought that was really that really stood out to me
Yeah.
too. It's just a very simple thing, but tilting, it changes the perspective so much.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a ton to say about this. I think I've said what I have to say about it. I do think it's worth a watch. I'm delighted to have found you brought this to the table, and it was a movie about which I had never heard of, but now I'm glad I've seen it. I don't know that I'm going to rush to see it again, but I wouldn't avoid it if somebody was like, "Oh, I really want to watch After Hours." I'd be like, "Oh, okay, I'll check that. I'd love to hear what you think about that. I'll check that out again." I think I would see different stuff on another viewing.
Yeah, like I said, I had seen this cover a lot on Prime or whatever, and and I think, like I say, I think I probably saw this in the video store as a kid. I wouldn't have known Martin Scorsese, then. Probably. But I would see it, and it just looks like a silly comedy, right?
Yeah.
And then when I realized that it was Scorsese, and I'd seen a little bit of talk about, I don't know if I said this already, but it's a 7.6 on IMDb with like 74,000. But it's interesting to watch a film from a director's career that, he has all these other films that have gotten all kinds of acclaim, and just nobody ever discusses this. So,
but it is interesting
in that regard.
It's interesting how the expectation that gets set from like a movie poster or a trailer affect your enjoyment or your perception of the film. Because I think if I just sat down and said, "All right, this one's called After Hours," and watched it, I don't know at the end. I think we would have had the conversation like, what would you call this movie, right? Would you call this a comedy? But the fact that it does have that poster, that kind of 3 o'clock high poster, and there's the big, feminine
fingers
with red fingernails, and his head is the fob of a stopwatch, and his neck is all twisted like she's twisting his, he's all twisted up. It does look like, an 80s sex comedy. I mean, it sort of is that, but it doesn't really conform to that. And I think I kept expecting, or I kept looking for it to somehow fit that mold. And I don't know necessarily that Scorsese was trying that hard. I think the script did that, and Scorsese just took the script and made the movie he wanted to make. I don't know. I'd love to hear him talk about it.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's YouTube's interviews or something we could look up.
Yeah, we should have, I guess, maybe done a little
done
bit.
Our basic homework.
To see what he. I know. I didn't really realize until fairly recently. This was another thing that I saw on Twitter, that he had a really bad cocaine problem at one point. And I want to say it was around the time, I think it was before they did Raging Bull. And I guess he was in the hospital, and Robert De Niro went to see him. And I mean, like, I guess he was in really, really bad shape. So I don't know if the cocaine thing was done by this point or not. I don't really, because I think what was Raging Bull, 1980, I think.
Yeah.
So this is 5 years
right.
later, and so maybe he'd gotten straightened out, but.
But
yeah,
know.
I would. I feel kind of the same as it's like I don't have a lot to say about this, but I think it's a really interesting film, and I enjoyed watching it. And I definitely, people who, I think people with a lot of different tastes. Because like I say, I'm not into the kind of hardcore Scorsese outside of Taxi Driver, and I like Cape Fear, but. Yeah, it's interesting to see a really great director doing a comedy, and also, if you like 80s movies, it checks off that box as well. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this.
I think if you like New York City movies,
yes,
this is a really interesting New York City movie.
Yeah, I'll tell you something funny. You talked about that it was like Mohawk Night or whatever. The first time that I went to New York City, and for people who haven't heard the show before and aren't familiar, we both grew up in West Virginia in a town of about 30,000 people. So New York is, a little bit different. I went and met with a friend of mine who was going to law school there. And we get in at like 2 a.m. We check into our hotel and we call her, or she calls us to, to say, that we're there. And she's like, do you guys want to go out? And we said, okay. And so she takes us to this bar called Voyeur. And it's all of the tables had little cameras, like little screens and cameras. So it was like, and a joystick. So like you could look around at other people's tables, like if you wanted to talk to them or whatever. But at any rate, we're just dressed in like t-shirts and jeans or whatever. And she's like, she's like, I didn't realize this is fetish night. So like everybody's dressed in leather and stuff, and and like a lot of probably people dressed in drag or trans people or whatever. And I went there with my sister and my brother-in-law, and we stayed for a little while, and like we were having fun, but she thought we were uncomfortable. I don't know why. And it was just really funny because we just stuck out like a sore throat because everybody's dressed in leather. We're
but they let you in. That's interesting.
They let us in and nobody cared. I mean, nobody paid any attention to us or anything. It was just like, whatever. But
there was a scene in this movie where he goes into a bar, and this is in the middle of the night, and the bartender is a character that he has repeated interactions with, and
I can't remember what that guy's name is, but he was a character actor that was in a lot of stuff.
There's the only other two people in the bar are a couple of leather daddies that are just down at the end of the bar in full, like with the mustache and the leather vests and the cycle helmets, and they're just sitting at the end of the bar making out, and it's not a part of the. It's apropos of nothing. It's just New York City. Nobody bats an eye. And I thought for 1985, that felt really very New York, very ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest of the country, when there was such a AIDS scare and a kind of a gay scare in general, a sort of generalized homophobia nationwide. To just have, in the script it might have been a couple at the end of the bar or whatever, but he's cast these two very specific, very identifiable. What in most of the rest of the country at that time would have been really unacceptable counterculture, but was just part of the New York City landscape. And there were a lot of little moments like that in this movie that I thought were really ahead of the time for 1985. And I appreciated that about it.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought it was like 1992 or something. And then I looked back at it, I'm like, this was 1985?
Yeah. Yeah, you're definitely right. There are some, and like you say, it's not like there's any, like they're beating you over the head with some kind of political message or something. It's just there, and yeah.
Nope. So you had also said that you wanted to talk a little bit about Spider-Man, not to do a whole episode on it, but you've now seen the newest Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. I didn't know if I had enough, like I say, to do an entire episode. I just to come right in. So I thought it was fantastic. And it was interesting. I went last Saturday and I went to like 11:30 in the morning, and I thought, nobody's going to be there. It was packed. It was full of families with kids and stuff. And the first one is a really great movie. And I think there's been so much talk recently. So kind of another topic that I wanted to talk about a little bit is the Flash movie bombed. It only, it was at some point they were projecting like, well over $100 million, like 120, and it only did 55 million. And there's been a lot of talk about how bad, I haven't seen it, but there's been a lot of talk of how bad the CGI is in it and all of this. And,
really, in this day and age, bad CGI.
Well, and I read, to go off on a little of an aside, I watched a video of a guy who had worked for a company that does CGI, no longer does, but he was saying how there are so many movies being made now that need CGI in them, and we're talking live action films. And the guy said the animators or whatever are being so overworked. And, like the guy was saying, like, you have this slate of all these Marvel films coming out, and they're coming out so quickly, they're cranking out the movies, and also they have to crank out the CGI. And the guy said, we've talked a lot about this, the kind of disposable nature of these films. And the guy said, people have talked about the CGI being really bad. And he said, the studios don't care because they just figure people are going to go and see it. They're not looking at these as movies that anybody's going to care about necessarily in 20 years. It's just, it's the widget that they're making, and they got to make money for the shareholders.
It's just
or whatever.
Popcorn, yeah.
Yeah. So contrast this Spider-Man. What is it? Spider-Man in the multiverse?
I mean, it's something multiverse.
Somebody's going to be is screaming at us right now. But anyway,
I mean,
it is a movie, and the first one is the same way, that seems so lovingly made. These are, people. I just thought, man, the amount of work that went into this, and the budget's $100 million, which contrasts that with The Flash, it's $200 million. But the movie, it just moves, but not. It's really fast paced, but it's not like you can't tell what's going on. And you have generally the very realistic CGI animation I've never been that crazy about, because I like cell animation. But this is a combination of the two, kind of. And the different universes have different styles. And it's just, this movie, I don't know if I said this already, but it's a work of art, you know, compared to, okay, we're just making this disposable product to get you to watch the next thing. And this ends on a cliffhanger to a degree. It literally says
to a degree, to 100% degree. I mean, I didn't realize we were getting, I went to see it with my daughter, and we went to a 10 a.m. show, and it was a $5 ticket.
Oh, wow.
That took me right back. I'm like, I'm never going to go to a movie theater at any other time but before noon again. Like, $5. Exactly. We had the place mostly to ourselves, and I'm like,
that's fantastic.
If I'm not going to have a burger and a beer in the theater, then I'm going to go at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. It's so beautiful, and there's so much care, and it is very fast paced, and that's not just the choreography and the action. That is also the way that it plays with the styles. It moves very fast. And I had the thought a number of times watching it that if it was any faster, it would lose me. And I'm sure they spent a lot of time going back and screening it and being like, is this too fast? The experience that it was for me in some of those action sequences was so smart, because it felt like I was hanging on by one hand. And that's very much Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man is constantly in free fall, constantly shooting a web. Like, it always just feels like, and that's part of the joy of the character of Spider-Man to me, is that it is just by the seat of the pants with this incredible confidence of, I can do both, right? It is one of the most charming characteristics of that character. It's youthful, it's naive. But he also manages to save the day again and again. So it's this incredible bravado and confidence combined with there not being a plan, you know? And I really felt like the experience of watching this movie made you feel like Spider-Man. It really made you feel like you were one of the Spider-Verse Spider-Men and women. I loved it. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. No. There's clearly going to be a third movie that's the conclusion to this one. I like this one better than the first one, and I loved the first one.
There's been a lot of talk of this as the, could this be is this the Empire Strikes Back of animated movies, where it's a film that, it elevates, what was builds on what the first one was and even, elevates to a greater degree. Another thing that I thought about is talking about these movies like The Flash, where there's so much talk about superhero fatigue, but this has already made something like $400 or $500 million.
But this is such a breath. I mean, it's about superheroes. It's about a superhero, but it's such a breath of fresh air. It's really about a kid, right? It's really about Miles Morales and his particular struggle. And it's so brilliant because he is Spider-Man in his universe. And Spider-Man has got this fatal flaw, right? That he can't. The thing that makes him Spider-Man is he couldn't save his uncle, but he feels like he could have. He could have. He should have been able to save his uncle, but it's the fact that he wasn't able to save his uncle that drives him to, this whole with great power comes great responsibility. That's what lands that hook for him. That he needs to. Everyone he saves is him trying to retroactively save his uncle, right? Mm-hmm. And yet Miles Morales has a very specific individual story and is a very specific individual teenager. And we get to meet a number of other Spider-Men and women in this that have their own very individual version. And you feel that, right? So yes, they're all Spider-Man. And it's so beautiful because it makes you feel like you're Spider-Man. Like, in what ways am I Spider-Man? And it is this incredibly, it's not exclusive. It's quite the opposite. It just opens it all up and it's like, it makes you start thinking about what's the best in me? What are my blind spots and the things what am I willing to risk? What do I believe in? Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. It's a super entertaining animated film. It's a super entertaining superhero film. And I think it's just a really, really original and well done film, full stop. It's a coming of age story. It's absolutely brilliant.
And absolutely, I mean, if you're into this kind of thing, see it in the theater so you can see it on a really big screen.
Absolutely. Apparently they had some sound mix that they fixed.
And the music is fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
There's like kind of jazz music and there's like hip hop in it and stuff, and it's all really great. But I think a lesson that Hollywood could learn here is not just to copy this, but that, we've had a long, long time that in the United States, animation is we basically have just had, kind of the Pixar animation, and they're fine, but that's basically just for children. And this is also, this isn't like this is an adult movie,
right?
But it's a little bit different from a Pixar in that,
right?
Yes, it is, it's acceptable for kids, but also I think this is a movie. I mean, we're adults and we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And there were quite a few there were some guys behind me that kept talking during the movie, but they were probably like in their 40s, not with kids. So it wasn't like I was I was there by myself, but it wasn't like I was the only just adult there to see it,
right?
Not with children. So I think, and the thing about, to me, it's a lot easier to adapt a comic book to animation since it's already a drawn style, right? You don't have to worry about an actor that looks the part and all that kind of stuff. But you think about
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you think about like a Batman, in this style or a kind of a similar style. I mean, it would just be huge.
Well, Spider-Man Batman is not a playful character, but Spider-Man really is a playful character. But I think that what you said about it's just so smart to make an animated comic book movie and draw upon all the different styles that we've seen over the years in comics, from the very, the very graphic novel all the way down to they have great fun with it. There's one little reality in which it's Lego and it's Peter Parker and his little Lego thing, and he goes, boop! He just changes, his arm just goes up and he's I love what Chris Miller and Phil Lord did with the Lego movie that universe. And so that's a little homage to their own work, but it really, they have enormous fun. Like the idea of like, well, it's a comic book movie and there's so many different styles, so why don't we really find something to celebrate in all of these different facets of, the canon of what is Spider-Man over the years. And they really do. And you don't have to know the deep cuts to appreciate the variety of the diversity of it in there. It's really
you even
something. Don't
necessarily have to have seen the first film.
That's
They give you kind of a little recap at the beginning, but yeah, like you're talking with the different styles they have. Like there's a punk rock Spider-Man, and his style is like a zine, like from the 80s, where it's kind of photocopied looking, and then you have the Indian. I loved the Indian Spider-Man. I thought he was really great.
Why would you say chai tea? Chai means tea. You're saying tea.
Yeah.
Do you want me to save some room in your coffee for cream? Because he's a wise-ass Spider-Man teen. Like, he is also. Yeah, that reality is awesome. That was Manhattan as though it was Bangladesh or something. Do you remember the name? It gives you the title card of what they called it. But it was... Is
it Mumbai, I think, maybe?
Mumbai Hatton or something like that.
Mumbai Hatton,
and it was so creative and so interesting.
I mean, as much as, again, I've got plenty of superhero fatigue and blockbuster fatigue, but again, this shows, my thing that I say all the time is that when people are like, oh, big blockbuster movie, you just turn your brain off. This isn't a movie that you turn your brain off. It's really, really well written.
It's super engaging.
I mean, this is, and the first one won Oscar for Best Animated Film, and I mean, this is, I don't know that I'll see a movie this year that I'll enjoy more than this.
Yeah. I think it's better. The first one had great fun with it. I think that what the success of the first one bought these guys, and this was not directed by Chris Miller and Phil Lord, but they were involved, I believe, in writing it, and they produced it. I think what the success of the first one bought them is faith. And they said, okay, what, guys, we're going to greenlight 2 more movies. See if you can make better ones. And they were like, and then I think they were wise enough to more or less get out of their way. I mean, the studio is going to be a studio, but it's like, look, we gave these guys money to make a first one, and they knocked it out of the park. So let's let them pick their bat and pick, like let's give them as much leeway as we can and see what they do. And I just think it's a richer, more complex, more engaging, more emotionally affecting. It takes everything the first one does well and it doubles down on it in great ways, and then it fleshes out the story of Miles Morales beyond just what it means to him to be a member of his family, and it explores what it means to him with his relationship to being Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
and usually that gets kind of glossed over or diluted down to like great power, great responsibility. Like, oh, if I have a girlfriend, I'm endangering my girlfriend. Oh, what am I going to do? And it doesn't go a lot deeper than that. It plays with those feelings, that storyline of Spider-Man again and again. This really gets existential about it in ways that I thought was like, that is meta. Like, that is really interesting without ever stopping being entertaining. I mean, we're going on and on. Like, we didn't spoil it. That's a big thumbs up from both of us.
Oh, yeah.
For this movie.
And I mean, I would say, this is certain to get nominated for Best Animated Film Oscar, but why box it into just animation? I mean, give it a nomination for,
I doubt
Best
it.
Picture.
I think
it won't happen.
Yeah, it won't happen. They're going to keep it because it's so animated. They're going to keep it.
It won't happen, but just from a technical achievement, I mean,
I agree.
it's just incredible.
I agree. Yeah.
So
awesome, possum.
Very high thumbs up.
Do you know what we're going to do next? Have we talked about that at all?
Well, I had thought about it's a movie that I have always wanted to see ever since I was a kid and never I've never seen it. I don't know if you have or not, but orcas are very popular right now.
Are they?
They're in the news because of orcas attacking ships, yachts and things. And so I thought we'd watch the movie Orca with Richard Harris. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It's basically, I mean, I think it was created as a Jaws ripoff.
Sure.
But I've always wanted to see it, and I thought that would be fun.
Okay, let's do
people are
orcas.
talking about orcas a lot.
Let's do orcas for next time. Or is it orca or orcas?
It's orca, yeah. It's just one orca. And I didn't say with back to After Hours for just a second. It only made like $10 million.
It's hard for me to imagine that being a financial success. I mean, people walk out of being like, what was that? Not that that was bad, but what was that? I don't know that those movies, you don't go home and tell your friends, oh, you got to see this, right? It doesn't.
You got to see After Hours.
It doesn't snowball.
So Orca came out in 1977. So yeah.
Hockey dockey do orca.
Okily dokily.
Chris and Chris Talk Movies at gmail.com. That's our handle. We are on the socials. Like and subscribe and send us some comments, some feedback, some suggestions. All of that stuff. We love it. We love to hear from
anybody's
you.
a big After Hours fan and
sure, educate us. Let
information
us know what
we would
missed.
love to. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us as always. And Orca for next time. So unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
I think that's everything.
We will talk to you all next week.